today I'm going to show you how to hand applique. And for my example, I'm going to be using the hexagon, and we're going to applique it to this background. And it doesn't matter what you're hand appliquing, you would do it the same way as far as if you have finished edges. So I've got finished edges here because I've already pressed all these down. This is much different than doing needle turn applique. So this is already pressed. Think of this as the same way you hand sew your binding onto a quilt. So it's the exact same thing. And it doesn't matter what you are appliquing, you always want to take your back piece and you want to find its center. And to find its center, we're just going to fold it this way and press. And then I'm going to fold it the opposite way and press. Then I'm going to decide which way I want this hexagon. Do I want it this way or do I want it this way? And I think I prefer this way. And so there'll be markings on your applique. Sometimes you'll be eyeballing it, but sometimes there's markings on your applique where you can use your best judgment to get this thing in the right place. And here's my center line, and then I've got these center seams. So I just put these seams right here on this line. I also want to make sure that this is a piece I'm going to just look at and eyeball. I can see that it's pretty close to being centered. I say it's centered. And then once I got it in place, I want to take some kind of glue. I always use this fabric fuse, but there's lots of types of fabric glue. You can even use Elmer's glue. You're basically looking for a glue that can wash out. I want to take the glue and I just want to put a few droplets like that just to hold it in place. I don't want to put any on the edges, so I'm just kind of putting it where I know my needle is not going to go. And I like to do it around the perimeter. It don't matter how big your applique is or anything like that, you would do this the exact same way. All right, just in case I take forever to applique this, I'm gonna put a pin right in the center. Now, if you don't want to use glue, you can always use your pins. I just don't like to use pins because they get in the way of my thread and needle when I start appliquing. So once you have this in place, you are ready to go. So I like to use micro quilter thread, and I like to use it in silver, not just because my fabric is a light gray. I use silver with every color except for maybe black. Silver has a way of blending into any color that you use as far as fabric. If you do want your color of thread to match, you want to match your thread to this piece, not this piece. I like micro quilter thread because it's 100 weight, so it's really, really thin. It has a way of looking as if it's not there at all. So if I'm making horrible stitches, if I'm clunky and they don't look good, it almost is okay because this thread just kind of hides. Because it is so thin, you do want to use a milliner's needle, and this is a needle with a very tiny eye, and this will stop your thread from falling out of your needle constantly. All right, so I just cut a piece of thread. I usually cut it, I'd say about 20 inches, but I don't measure it, I just eyeball it. And then I double up right here. So I just fold it over, and then I just make a very basic, simple knot. I don't pull it super tight. I kind of leave it a little loose. Then you just put your thread in your needle. I like to bring my thread to the needle, not the needle to the thread. It's just easier for me to get it in there. And I'm gonna go in from the back. And I don't wanna start at a point. I wanna kind of start in the middle. And I'm just kind of entering, and I wanna just come out right there on that edge of my hexagon. Forgot to put my thimble on. Put your thimble on. All right, you'll feel your knot catch. Don't pull it too hard because you could pull it all the way through. And then we start in behind the thread, and I'm picking up the background, and when I come back through, I'm putting it back through the edge of the hexagon. And then I pull till it catches. And then once more, go behind the thread, grab a piece of the hexagon, and pull. And that's it, that's the stitch. And it's just over and over and over again. You don't want to make your stitches big. You want to just I would say somewhere in the vicinity of 1/8 inch. But you be the judge of, how your stitches look. There's no right or wrong, it's just preferences. And it's hard to get it exactly the same every time, but that's your goal, is to make it consistent. Your goal is also to try not to get too far into your hexagon, like take a smaller bite. That last stitch I took a little bit of a bigger bite. When you don't have a point in your applique piece, this part doesn't matter. But when you do, you want to make sure that your needle comes right up through that point so that it anchors it to the background. And then I put it back down right at the point too. Some quilters prefer to do it on a tabletop surface like this, and some prefer to hold it and do it. I have always been a holder, but after doing large pieces of applique, I actually found that I do like the table. So I'm kind of, if I'm doing a big applique, I might just do it on a table like this. If I'm doing a really small one, I will hold it in my hand and not have it on the table like this. All right, when we get to one of these corners right here, I want to do the same thing. I want to land right there in that nook so that I can anchor this edge of my applique and it doesn't get weakened with use. And then when I go back down, I want to go right back and take a very small bite. Whether you do this or not will really depend on what you're hand appliquing to your background. This is the same method. You see me doing it on a hexy flower, but this is the same method that I use to hand applique everything. When I think that I'm about to run out of thread, you don't want to wait till it's too late. So I've still got, maybe 6-8 inches left on my thread, but it's getting hard to keep the thread from slipping out. So when that happens, I know it's time for me to change my thread. So find where your very last stitch is, and you want to go in right behind it, maybe a little behind and under it. Come out the back. And you want to be on the inside where you know you're on the inside of the applique, not on the background fabric. And you just want to pick up that background layer. Make sure you're not picking up your applique too. Put your needle through. You want to pull it through one time. I'm about to lose this thread. So you pulled it through one time. You want to put it right back through the same hole, but this time make your loop and then put your needle through your loop to knot off. And I'm going to do that one more time. All right, so you can see where I've stopped at. And when I pick back up, I'm just going to start in that exact same place, and I'm going to start the exact same way. I'm going to tie a double knot in my thread, and then I'm going to come in from the back right where those stitches left off at, and then that's how you complete the whole applique. Here's what it will look like when it's all finished. Better look at the stitches so you can see that thread just really does disappear. So that is how you hand applique.